We all know the image of ancient Egypt, right? Giant pyramids scraping the sky. For centuries, that's what pharaohs did. But then, they just stopped. Instead, they started digging down, carving their tombs deep into the earth, creating this secret city of the dead. So, what on earth happened? Let's explore the incredible architecture of the Valley of the Kings.
And that's really the big question here. Why would you trade a massive pyramid, this huge symbol of your power that everyone could see for miles, for a hidden hole in the ground? Well, the answer tells us a whole lot about a major shift in how the Egyptians thought about death, the afterlife, and, maybe most importantly, security.
To find that answer, we've got to go to this remote, sun-baked canyon on the west bank of the Nile. Today, we call it the Valley of the Kings. And believe me, the location was no accident. It was chosen with incredible care.
So, the number one reason for the change? One word: security. You see, the Great Pyramids were basically giant billboards that screamed, "Treasure buried here." And guess what? Pretty much all of them got robbed. So, the pharaohs of the New Kingdom learned a tough lesson and decided their best bet was to just disappear, to create tombs that were meant to be sealed up and never found again.
And they had so many good reasons for picking this exact spot. For starters, it was on the west bank of the Nile, where the sun sets. That was symbolically the land of the dead. It was also super isolated, tucked away in a canyon with steep cliffs all around. And, what I think is the coolest part, a natural mountain peak that looks just like a pyramid towered over the whole valley. It was like a divine seal of approval. So how did they actually build these hidden marvels? This wasn't about stacking giant stones upwards. No, this was about digging downwards, carving a palace for eternity right out of the living rock of the mountain.
You have to understand, a tomb wasn't just a grave. It was like a machine for rebirth. That long, sloping corridor you see in most of them, that was a map. It represented the pharaoh's soul traveling through the dangerous underworld every night, just like the sun god Ra, so he could be reborn every single morning.
And they did all this with some pretty simple tools. We're talking copper chisels, which are actually kinda soft, and wooden mallets. For light, they just had little oil lamps. And all the rubble, I mean tons and tons of it, had to be carried out by hand, in baskets. It's just an amazing feat of pure grit and engineering.
What's really cool is that you can see how their plans changed over the 500 years they used the valley. The early tombs have this sharp, right-angled turn in them, almost like they were trying to mimic a winding, hidden cave. But later on, they straightened the whole thing out. It was probably easier to build, and it created this grand, straight path for the funeral procession to go right into the burial chamber.
So once all that carving was done, the real magic began. The bare rock walls were about to be turned into a complete, illustrated guide to surviving the afterlife.
Yeah, this art wasn't for show. Nobody was ever supposed to see it again. These paintings and hieroglyphs were basically a divine GPS. They were packed with spells and instructions from sacred texts like the Book of the Dead, all designed to help the pharaoh fight off monsters and pass the tests of the underworld.
And the process itself was so meticulous. First, workers would smooth the limestone walls until they were like a perfect canvas. Then, master artists sketched out all the scenes in hieroglyphs. After that, carvers would carefully chip away at the stone to make the images pop. And finally, painters would come in and bring it all to life with these stunning colors.
So how did they get these incredible colors? Well, they ground up minerals from the earth, yellow ochre for yellows and golds, malachite for green, and for that brilliant blue, they used precious lapis lazuli. Then they mixed these powders with a binder, maybe like egg white. And because of the super dry desert air, those colors are still jaw-droppingly vibrant today. All right, so we're following these decorated corridors deeper and deeper into the mountain, and we finally arrive at the most sacred space in the entire structure, the burial chamber. And there, right in the heart of the chamber, is the sarcophagus. Just so we're all on the same page, think of a sarcophagus as the ultimate protective shell. It's this massive, heavy stone box, usually covered in protective spells, and it's the final layer of defense for the pharaoh's body. And when I say massive, I am not kidding. These things could weigh several tons. How in the world they carefully lowered a solid granite box that heavy down those long, narrow passages is, well, it's still a bit of a mystery. It's a true architectural marvel. But it didn't stop there. Inside that huge stone box, it wasn't just the mummy. The pharaoh was protected by a whole series of coffins, each one fitting perfectly inside the last, just like a set of Russian nesting dolls.
For a king like Tutankhamun, the very innermost coffin was made of solid gold.
So with all this incredible treasure buried alongside the king, the tomb architects had to become security experts. They came up with all sorts of ingenious ways to try and outsmart anyone who dared to break in.
They really used every trick in the book. There were false walls that led absolutely nowhere, deep pits hidden in the floor designed to trap you, and massive stone blocks that would seal passages completely shut. Even the entrance itself was buried under tons of rock chips to make it look like any other part of the desert landscape.
But here's the crazy twist. For all that effort, it didn't work. The temptation of all that gold and treasure was just too much. And we know now that despite all the traps and secrets, nearly every single tomb in the valley was found and robbed in ancient times.
So, if the tombs kind of failed at their number one job, what is their legacy today? Well, to understand that, we need to look at the people who actually built them, and at the totally new challenges these tombs are facing right now.
And this is a really important point. Forget all those old movies. The guys who carved and decorated these tombs were not slaves. They were highly skilled professional craftsmen. They lived in their own special village, they were paid by the state for their work, and many of them could even read and write. They were the best of the best.
It's kind of ironic, isn't it? The biggest danger to the tombs today doesn't come from robbers, it comes from us, the people who love them. All the moisture from the breath of thousands of tourists visiting every day can actually cause the ancient paint to flake off and the limestone walls to crumble. We're literally destroying them with our admiration.
That's why modern preservation work is so critical. Scientists and conservators are installing high-tech ventilation systems to control the air, putting up glass screens to protect the paintings, and even rotating which tombs are open to give them a chance to rest. And they're using cool stuff like ground-penetrating radar to search for new chambers without even having to dig. You know, the Valley of the Kings was meant to be a secret, an untouchable home for the pharaohs, and while most of its gold was stolen, it ended up preserving something way more valuable, a perfect snapshot of what these people believed, their art, and their incredible ingenuity. Which just leaves you with one final thought. After all this time, what else is still out there, waiting to be found under the sand?